Think your team is set for the playoffs? Think again. There's always value to be found in streamers, and stashing for the playoffs is becoming more important by the week. So, each week, I'll be bringing you a video answering two simple questions. Who should I stream this week, and who should I stash for the future on the Fantasy First Down? I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down and the Week 12 Streamers and Stashes show. To keep things simple, as always, we'll define any player you wouldn't usually start who's a viable option for this week. And we'll define a stash as anyone you can potentially find on waivers that you should stash for the future, either because they've got a good matchup coming off maybe in the playoffs, or because they could be a future fantasy starter. If you've got any questions, hit us up in the comments below or on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down or on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O. Let's get into it. And we'll start off with the quarterbacks. And without Marvin Harrison Jr., Jacoby Brissett completed a record 47 passes in Week 11. He now faces a top 5 quarterback matchup, which happens to coincide with one of the hardest rushing matchups. It's hard to see Arizona getting the run game going again this week after they only had, 10-odd rushes last week, making Brissett a fantastic one-off streamer. And it's natural to feel a little sketchy about Caleb Williams given his propensity for dud weeks, but he's been consistently good in juicy matchups. This week, he faces the Steelers, who continue to struggle against the pass while being strong against the run. The Bengals admittedly reversed that trend last week, making this a riskier stream than I prefer, but the upside is most certainly there for the Bears passer. Looking further forward, though, I like JJ McCarthy's playoff matchups. He gets the Cowboys, Giants, and Lions, ranked 1st, 3rd, and 12th in matchup rankings. And as a bonus, in Week 14, he gets the 6th ranked Washington. He's a fine stash if you don't have a clear-cut starter. Now, there are some very clear running back streamers, and we'll start off with the obvious one. Emmanuel Wilson is the clear Packers starter if Josh Jacobs does miss Week 12, and that's looking less and less likely as the week goes on. Wilson's a riskier start than Jacobs, as Green Bay will likely work in Chris Brooks and rely on the passing game more, but he's still a top 20 option for me in a middling matchup. And the Saints bizarrely go into their matchup against the Falcons as the favorites, according to Vegas. That brings Alvin Kamara into play as a strong streaming start against an Atlanta defense that is considered the 4th most points to running backs this season, and that is growing by the week. And the Seahawks are 13.5-point favorites against the awful Titans and should lean on the run against a weak Tennessee run defense, especially after Sam Darnold's implosion last week against the Rams. That brings Zach Charbonnet and, of course, Kenneth Walker well into play despite their very awkward committee situation. Meanwhile, the Jaguars confusingly make their backfield a 50-50 split in Week 11, leading to way more touches for rookie Bashal Tuden before an injury knocked him out partway through. There's a chance this is the changing of the guard, so it's worth stashing Tuden just in case. And we know there's always plenty of stashes necessary in running back land, but as the season goes on, it becomes less necessary as we do see less injuries in the final few weeks because there's just less season to go. Having said that, you're still going to see a few, and it is definitely worth stashing the best backups. For me, Blake Corum and Brian Robinson are well and truly at the top of the list. Ollie Gordon, Tank Bigsby, and Chuba Hubbard would likely be the main guys in their offenses, as would Isaiah Davis in admittedly a weaker offense. I think Amir Abdullah is in more of a committee, but it's such a strong run game that you're definitely worthwhile using him. And same thing with Keaton Mitchell. While Raheem Mostert probably gets a lot of touches, but is he getting the receiving work? Is it going to be worthwhile? Because I'm not seeing a lot out of Ashton Genty. That's the real question. And guys like Michael Carter and Devin Neal, they're only desperation handcuffs if you've got a spare bench spot. Meanwhile, with the receivers, and I spoke earlier about Jacoby Brissett's likelihood of another pass-heavy game, and if Marvin Harrison Jr. remains out, Michael Wilson will be the main beneficiary, with Greg Dortch, a desperation streamer, if MHJ is indeed out again. If Harrison plays, I'm still starting Wilson, but he is a lower down the list option. And Darnell Mooney has 15 targets across his last 2 games and should benefit from Drake London's potential absence. There's plenty of risk here, given Mooney has as many one-reception games as multi-reception games, with 4 of each this season. But without London, you have to believe Mooney and Kyle Pitts are going to become the top dogs. Meanwhile, Jacoby Myers is seeing his snaps rise since his arrival at the Jaguars. He appears to be the top option in the passing game with Brian Thomas Jr. out, and is a viable streamer in a tough Cardinals matchup. It's an awkward situation. You don't really know what to expect. In his first week, he started off with odd snaps, kind of moved up to 60%. You'd hope that he'd be close to being an every down starter by now, but at the moment it's just Parker Washington doing that. But I do think Myers is going to get more looks, and maybe even when Thomas comes back, still becomes a viable option. If you're looking for a true stash, though, the Bears gave rookie Luther Burden, the wide receiver, 3 job last week. We know players can boom towards the end of their first season, and while I don't think that's likely here, it's possible he can carve out a fantasy-relevant role, especially if there's an injury to Roma Dudze or DJ Moore. He's a very risky start in Week 12 despite the juicy Steelers matchup, but he must be rostered in every league. Now, the Patriots suck against tight ends, and Hunter Henry has played every snap last week except for a couple where they didn't have a tight end on the field because Austin Hooper was a last-minute out, and they used Jack Westover as their fullback, and they didn't really want to use him as a tight end. Henry usually brings a low floor, but if Austin Hooper remains out, then Henry goes from being a low-end stream to a reliable start in this current tight end landscape. And if Drake London is out for Week 12, as I said earlier, Kyle Pitts becomes a major receiving outlet for Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. The Saints matchup is a bit meh, but I'm confident Pitts can rebound from a disappointing couple of weeks if London is indeed absent. And AJ Barner has struggled with injury and consistent production this season, but with Seattle getting little out of their non-JSN receivers, I can see Barner emerging as a key player down the stretch. He has a trio of top half tight end matchups in the fantasy playoffs and offers a heap of touchdown upside. That's especially the case if the Seahawks continue to use him more as their QB sneaker and he starts to get some goal line looks. For our kickers, I've been high on the best kicker all season as Cairo Santos and Jake Moody have combined for top 5 production well under the radar. This week, Santos gets a top 5 kicking matchup against the Steelers, so he's a great kicking streamer for me. He's likely to be a top 3 guy in my rankings. And Ari Borogalis paid off sufficiently last week, so I'm going back to the well. There should be plenty of points in the Patriots-Bengals game, giving the youngster a strong floor and a pretty high ceiling as well. On the defensive side of the ball, the Browns have played well against good opponents of late, so they should show even better against the struggling Raiders. Especially in leagues that prioritize sacks and interceptions over points conceded, the Browns are a top option for me. And the Falcons have high sack upside. I think I've had 18 the last 3 weeks combined or something like that. And I can imagine them shutting down the Saints in a grind fest in Week 12. This should lead to a good DST outing. But I still won't be listing kicker or DST stashes. It is still too early. You should never put kickers or DSTs on your bench in redraft leagues. There's so much more upside with other positions. There's practically no exceptions. Just please don't do it. And that's all we've got for the Week 12 Streamers and Stashes show. I hope you enjoy a fantastic weekend of football. As always, hit me up in the comments or on my socials with questions, and it would be great if you could like and subscribe on YouTube. I'll see you guys next week.